Episode of Under the Spotlight, the show where we take major figures from in and around Greater Manchester, putting them under the spotlight to see what they have to offer the student community. Today I'm joined by Dan George, the Associate Vice President for Blended and Flexible Learning at the University of Manchester. Dan, would you like to tell the viewers a bit about yourself?
Hi Joe, yes, as you say, I'm the Associate Vice President for Blended and Flexible Learning. I'm also a Professor of Radio Frequency Communication in the Faculty of Science and Engineering.
Thank you. So we'll just get straight in now. I'm aware some of our viewers may not be familiar with the term flexible learning, so could you please tell us what this actually is and what does it entail?
Yeah, so we've just very recently announced our flexible learning strategy, the launch of the strategy for the university. And at the heart of it is we really want to create lifelong learning that's inclusive, it's accessible, and it's international. So that's sort of our three sort of stools of it, and crucially, so it prepares our students for an increasingly interconnected digital world. So that's sort of at the heart of it. You can think of it as sort of two different areas. Think about our on-campus students. So we want to create greater flexibility for our on-campus students. So when you're on campus as a student, you know, we want it to be worth your while to come on campus. So we want that to be interactive learning. We want that mix of sort of real-time learning and stuff that you can do at your own pace. And we want it to be purposely designed teaching that content so that we make sure it does support your learning and development. So that's sort of the on-campus bit. There's also a big piece within the flexible learning strategy on our off-campus students. So we want to extend that offering of a Manchester education, University of Manchester education, to anyone and everyone. We know that our 3 or 4 year undergraduates or our 1 year, 2 year postgraduate degrees don't work for everyone, and why should that stop you from having a University of Manchester education? So we want to deliver education that fits with the learners' lives. So for people with caring responsibilities, people who might already be in a career, people who don't live in and around Manchester, etc. So there's sort of two elements for the on-campus students and to grow what we have off-campus. That growth in our off-campus provision is not, it is sort of in addition to what we have. It's not reducing anything that we have on campus.
Perfect. So on that kind of subject, before we dive in more into flexible learning, I'd just like to address the controversy and the backlash from the initial announcement back in summer 2021. So for those of our viewers who aren't aware, when the initiative was first announced, it was met with a wave of criticism of its fears that teaching would be moved permanently online. Now, it was eventually clarified that this would not be the case, but students were already kind of anxious and angry over perceived mood. So Dan, I'd just like to ask you what, if anything, has changed since that initial announcement, and do you have any regrets about the way it was perceived by students?
Yeah, so like you say, Joe, I mean, it was an emergency move to online, so not to flexible learning or blended learning. It was moved to online, during that pandemic. We wanted to make sure that when we closed our doors on campus, it wasn't, closing the teaching and learning of the university. The initial announcement that we had was intended to say that what we've done in this sort of emergency response is all fine, and we had to do that, in order to carry on with our teaching and learning. But it wasn't a well thought out sort of learning strategy, teaching and learning strategy, and that was misrepresented in the media, as you say. What we did from that is set up a load of meetings, like you say, lots of students. There was lots of students were unhappy about it. We set up lots of open meetings, and just to talk to the students about what a well thought out step to flexible and blended learning would be, and what the students thought about that. So forget the bit that you've heard that's been totally misrepresented. This is what we're actually talking about. And we spoke to hundreds of students. So a good thing that sort of came out of it, looking back, is it got a lot of media coverage, and that was good from my point of view on hindsight, because lots of students engaged with the process. So when we had these open meetings, lots of students came to them, once we described what it is we were actually talking about, it's about creating this lifelong learning, inclusive, accessible, international. Nothing about we're becoming an online university, we're absolutely an on-campus university, etc. Once that was very clear, then students were like, oh, that sounds really good. Like, how can I get involved? So we've had lots of really good student engagement from that. So I think that's a good thing. In terms of what's changed, so for the past 18 months, we've worked really, really closely with the Students' Union, which has been a real positive for us. We've employed students as partners as part of the flexible learning programme. We've had several hundred students join us on 18 different workshops that we work through just to learn about what students want and need to make their learning more flexible and more blended. So what they do want, what they don't want, etc. Thankfully, we're back on campus. We're actually on campus talking now, which is brilliant. Loads of in-person teaching. And the added benefit now is we've actually got extra resources. So it's still all of our on-campus teaching, which is all brilliant. But now it can be augmented by a lot more of the digital tools as well. So I think those sort of things have changed. I think it's really crucial for us, for me, for flexible learning, to continue to have that student involvement as well. So this wasn't just, we want to engage with students because you haven't been happy. Great that we've managed to get lots of students through that route, but now we need to make sure we keep those students, those student voices throughout this strategy, and make sure that when we're shaping the strategy, it's actually being shaped by students as well.
So will these kind of like meetings and engagement sessions with students continue as the programme begins to be implemented?
They certainly will, yeah. We're actually setting up a permanent student design group for flexible learning as well. So the actual programme itself will run from continue from now up until September. Up until 2026. Yes, and throughout that time we'll have student design groups as well, and that won't be our only students, but it will be, at least we'll have a core set, and those students will be able to go out and chat to other people as well.
Okay, so now we'll move on to the actual strategy itself. So one key element of this new flexible learning is going to be this thing called a flexible learning innovation space. So firstly, I'd just like to ask you what exactly this means and what will it look like?
Yeah, so one of the things that came out of the workshops with the students was they wanted to see a lot more sort of on-campus provision, somewhere that you could maybe trial different ways of teaching, different ways of learning. So what we absolutely listened to that. What we have now is Prospects House, which hopefully some people know about, in quite near sort of McD area, near the Aquatic Centre. That whole building is being dedicated to the flexible learning innovation space. So within that, we will have things like a commuter student lounge. It's not huge, but it is a commuter student lounge in there, and we'll have things in there, places where commuter students can come and just feel like it's their home on campus, sort of thing. So there'll be sort of soft furnishings, there'll be places that they can just study on their own, they can study in groups. There'll be things like water facilities, fridge, microwaves, things like that, so they can feel like they've got a home for when they're on campus.
Okay.
There'll also be, just as another example, an XR space, an extended reality space. What we want to try out with this is using virtual reality in our teaching and learning. And there's pockets of it, in different subjects, but could we have a space on campus where, maybe in the morning you might have medical students with, VR headsets on, and they're studying human anatomy. Then in the next hour, mechanical engineering students come in and they're looking virtually at a big industrial jet engine. You might have town planners looking at a city, etc. So it's a really flexible space in terms of all the subjects using that extended reality. So these are the type of things that we want to trial. Prospects House is the first bit for a trial of different things. We'll then have the building called Booth Street East. We'll have 3 floors in Booth Street East, so we'll sort of make sure the trials, whatever we're doing within Prospects House, the things that are working really well, the things that students want, will then transfer into Booth Street East, and because it's a bigger space. And then there'll be other spaces in there as well that we want students to lead. So it's not, we do want co-creation with students, but actually we want students to lead these pilots as well. We want to hear that, you know, they want to take a room and develop it in a certain way for their learning, etc. So we must have student-led pilots, is my view, for all of this innovation space. And we want to make sure that these are treated as jobs, as paid employment for students as well. So we're not asking them to do it for free. These are going to be paid roles that students can come and lead some pilots to make sure that we have the type of spaces on campus in the future that they want.
Cool. So in terms of this kind of extended reality space, so what will it look like, and when will it be completed for students to use? Because this all sounds exciting, but how long will it be until it's ready?
Yeah, so it'll be ready in early 2023, so sort of semester 2 of this academic year. That's in Prospects House. Work is going on in Booth Street East already. There's sort of building works, estate works that need to do that before we can actually get in there. But Prospects House will be ready in early 2023. And so the extended reality space will be ready, and the commuter space will be ready then.
Okay, so, and on the commuter students lounge, so commuter students are kind of almost an often underrepresented group in university life. So how will this benefit them? What will they gain from having this space dedicated to them?
So I think it can be very costly, like financially, for commuter students. Once they come on campus, they might have a lecture in the morning and a lecture midday and then a lecture in the late afternoon. What do they do in between? If they sit in cafes or they need to buy lunch or whatever, it can be quite expensive. So we wanted to make sure there is a space where they can, bring their food, have a cup of tea, heat their food up, etc. And a space that they can feel that they can, dump their rucksack and it's their home for whilst they're on campus.
Okay, so moving on, so I'd like to discuss another key part of this strategy, so the digital learning environment. So again, could you please explain to our viewers what exactly this means? Yes,
so the digital learning environment, and you might hear things like the DLE or the CLE, the central learning environment, and you might also hear terms called the VLE, the virtual learning environment. I'll try and explain all of them. So our digital learning environment, so this is what we want from our what's called now our virtual learning environment. So Blackboard, as everyone will know it at the minute. So our Blackboard is our virtual learning environment at the moment. We want to sort of extend that into a digital learning environment. So not just that central environment, but also what other digital tools, what other apps, etc. And that whole bit comes together as the DLE, the digital learning environment. Again, we chatted to a lot of students about this. And there was 3 key things that they wanted from it. They wanted it to be, whatever we have is our digital learning environment. They want it to be accessible. They want it to work for everyone across any device. That was their big thing. It doesn't matter what device I have, I want to be able to access it. We want it to host engaging content, so not just some sort of repository where you sort of dump a load of lecture notes or something. It needs to have engaging content and to be able to collaborate easily with other students, but also staff, teaching staff as well. And then really crucially was it needs to be easy to use and to have one login for all the different learning platforms that students have at the minute. So they are sort of our 3 key things that we keep in mind when we're talking about this digital learning environment.
So how will this kind of differ? So you mentioned Blackboard, so how will this differ to pre-existing tools? Is it going to build on it? Is it going to be a completely new system? What will this look like?
Yeah, I mean, at the minute, we don't know. We will have our Blackboard environment until 2025. This will be our new central learning environment will come in September 25. It's quite a long sort of procurement process of choosing that new product. And it might be an upgraded version of Blackboard, it might be Microsoft Teams, it could be Moodle, Canvas, all of these other platforms. It could be a combination of all of those things. So at the minute, we just don't know. We're just getting information, gathering sort of requirements from students and staff as to what they want from it. But always at the back of it, it needs to be accessible, needs to work for everyone, needs to host engaging content, and needs to be easy to use.
Okay, so I think we touched on this earlier, but I think it's safe to say that the largely negative memories of online learning are still fresh in the minds of many staff and students. So whilst this is clearly due to the pandemic, it still kind of begs the question, is there an appetite for this kind of flexible learning approach? Is this something students want?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something we've asked students. These are some ideas about flexibility. If we're asking on-campus students, what we've had to make really clear is this is not about removing your on-campus experience or your face-to-face, interactive or lectures, etc. We just want to make it worth your while to come on campus and to have the environment that when you come on campus, you're going to get the best out of your learning from it. So whether that's making lectures more interactive, whether that's having study spaces, whether that's having different innovative ways of teaching and learning. And when you sort of say it like that, many of our students sort of say, well, why wouldn't you want that? It's a good question. Why wouldn't you want that?
So what are some of these kind of like innovative ways of teaching and learning? So you mentioned kind of interactive lectures. So what would, say, an interactive lecture look like, and how would it differ to a current lecture?
Yeah, if so I'm in the School of Science and Engineering, the School of Engineering. So if you take an example for me, what I might do in my course, say it's electronic circuit design, what I might do in that is say to my students, right, okay, I'm gonna here's the video that I've made, and it might be a 9-minute video, and it's about a fundamental concept that we're going to talk about. And it's almost like doing your homework before you come into the lecture theatre. So you do your homework, if you like, on, let's say, Monday afternoon, and crucially there's a time slot in your timetable to watch this content. So you can watch it then. You might not want to watch it then, but there's place in your timetable to watch it then. And I've delivered a video that gives you a fundamental concept that we need to talk about, you need to understand for the subject. Then on our lecture, let's say Thursday morning, you come into that lecture theatre. I can then quickly poll you all on your mobile phones to say, right, okay, you've all watched that video on this concept. What's the bit that you're not getting? Do we need to go over anything? And then I, in real time, I can see, okay, there's a concept that everybody's not getting here. Right, okay, let's go over that again. So we're going to go over that again in the class. If everybody gets it, brilliant. Now we're going to do some problem solving on that content. So I've sort of flipped that lecture now. You've done some work before you come in. Now we're going to do some problem solving, and it's much more interactive for you. But like I say, crucially, we've got time in the timetable for you to do that pre-work, that homework as well. You don't have to watch it then. You can watch it, 2:00 in the morning if you want, but you can watch it anytime, anywhere, as many times as you like. You can fast forward and rewind just so you understand the concept. You can do that before you come into the lecture theatre, so that you've got a bit more knowledge before you come into the lecture theatre. Then we can run through things that you might not have grasped too well, and then do some problem solving. So that's an example.
Okay, so this kind of brings me on to my next question. So obviously that's a very kind of STEM-centric example. And so with humanities students, so it's obviously slightly different. So we do have our reading and our lectures and our seminars, but again, we only have approximately 9 hours of content hours a week. So will flexible learning reduce these already quite limited content hours? It
will definitely not reduce it. Humanities students, or humanities as a subject, have sort of been doing this for a long time in many ways, because if you think about a STEM-based, like you say, STEM-based subject, they might have 200, 300 students in a lecture theatre and one lecturer. And you could look at that, well, actually that's quite an efficient way from a lecturer's point of view, because I'm talking to 200 students and I'm getting a concept across. It's very didactic, and actually from a student perspective, it's not the best experience. Humanities students have actually had seminars that have been, you're broken down into smaller classes. There's more lecture time for those sort of individuals. So if you don't think about just the contact time, if you think about the quality of that contact time and the ratio of the students versus the staff, then actually humanities subjects have been doing this for a really long time.
Okay, so will this kind of lead to smaller classroom sizes for kind of STEM students, for humanities students? What will kind of an average flexible learning session look like in terms of the size and the method of delivery?
Yeah, so lots of different ways. You could have that sort of seminar type where you're breaking a class of, let's say, 300 down into smaller ways of doing it. You could also have in the example I was just giving, where you have sort of a problem-based learning activity, there might be me as the lecturer in that big lecture theatre, and then I might have graduate teaching assistants with me as well, who are going around the lecture theatre with me saying, right, okay, we've had this problem, how are you getting on with it, do you need some help, etc. So there's still quite a lot you can do from a blended learning environment in our traditional spaces on campus. You'll see that we're getting more of that sort of blended learning spaces. If you look in McD, there's a blended lecture theatre. And that's really looking at, okay, here's a concept, now we want you to go do something. So break up into small groups, and there's the space in the lecture theatre to do that as well. So I think it's a mindset change for us from a teaching and learning perspective, but also how we use our spaces on campus needs to change as well.
Okay, so you just mentioned that postgraduates will be assisting in a lot of this kind of teaching. So will that differ from what their current workload is? Will that be an addition? Would any of their contracted hours change? Because obviously we have strikes coming up tomorrow, and there is a central issue surrounding kind of all of higher education, that is postgraduate teaching. So kind of how would this fit in with the existing methods of postgrad teaching?
So graduate teaching assistants are paid for roles. At the minute, we've got people ask for what they need. What we might find in the future is we need more of them. So graduate teaching assistants have their own things to do, whether that's their research, etc. So there's only a certain amount of time that they can spend doing this. But we might find that we need more of them. So not just more hours from the same people, but more graduate teaching assistants. But they have to be paid for roles.
Okay, so kind of on the subject of postgraduate studies, so one key tenet of this strategy is flexible pathways and new approaches to learning. So will integrated Masters for Humanities courses be part of this?
Integrated Masters for Humanities courses? Maybe. It's certainly an option. I can't say for sure, I'm not the Dean of Humanities, but it's certainly a pathway we'd like to open. There's lots of different pathways. Remember that this is not just about our on-campus students. The pathways we want to sort of grow are things like continued professional development. We want to look at more degree apprenticeships. We want to look at using our international centres. The University of Manchester has international centres to deliver teaching. So we want to learn, how we use those more as well. So this is not about bringing more and more students on campus. This is about opening Manchester education to people who can't necessarily come on campus in the same way that we do now in our sort of traditional 3-year, 4-year, 1-year, 2-year.
Thank you. So moving on, so in conversation I've had with staff and students, one overarching concern they have with this proposed strategy is training and skills. Will the university offer training to staff and students on how to use all these new tools and services?
Yes, it's absolutely crucial. If we are going to do, this is going to be quite a new way of teaching and a new way of learning for staff and students. So we must make sure that we enhance the digital skills. And we need to do it in a way that benefits not only the learning from a student perspective, but in their lives and in their careers as well. a couple of things that are already ongoing. So students have access to what's called the GISC Discovery tool. This explores students' digital capabilities, and we have flexible learning students as partners that are promoting that tool with students as well. So this is something that we want to offer in sort of welcome and induction, or welcome back, so you can assess what your digital skills are. Then we need to make sure that we give you different opportunities, whether that's within your subject itself or if you want to do some extracurricular stuff. We give you access to improve and increase your digital skills. So almost you would graduate with like a digital passport, where you'd have maybe different digital badges of the different things that you've done. And it's a great way to go to an employer and go, here you are, here's all my digital skills that I can do. And the digital skills for a computer scientist might be very different for digital skills for a historian, as an example. We've got to make sure that this is absolutely personalised for individual students, so that they leave with their own digital passport. So the GISC delivery tool is doing that.
For staff?
And for staff as well, yes. So we made the call on, right, this is a new thing for us as a university. What do we do first? Well, actually, let's prioritise students. So we did it first with our students. It's now available for staff as well. So it'll be making sure that staff are comfortable and competent and confident in their own digital skills. That doesn't mean we're expecting subject matter experts to be multimedia experts and instructional design experts, etc. If they want to do it, that's brilliant, and we should give them the continued professional development to do that. But if they don't, that's also fine. We need to make sure that there is a team around them that do have those skills. So part of the flexible learning strategy is about a design and delivery by team. So we were talking about the delivery by team before with GTAs as an example. The design by team is the same as well. So you might have the subject matter experts, then you've got the digital learning service, you've got instructional designers, you've got multimedia experts, etc., who will be able to help to design that content as well.
Yeah. So another concern that's been raised is the issue of digital poverty. So according to a survey by the Office for Students, during the pandemic, 52% of students said their learning was impacted by a slow or unreliable internet connection, while 71% stated they didn't have access to a quiet learning space. What support will the university offer to those students affected by digital poverty?
Yeah, so what we need to make sure, if we are moving towards more flexible learning, which includes more digital tools, we don't increase that digital divide. It's absolutely crucial and at the heart of the strategy. As you'll know, during the pandemic, there was a lot of work done to make sure that the people that you've described who had challenges from a digital perspective were given laptops, dongles, spaces on campus to come and still work, etc. That is and that was great, within the pandemic. That still continues today as well. So there are still laptop loans, there are still dongle loans for Wi-Fi. There's an increase in terms of the spaces on campus that you can use as well. A couple of things as part of the strategy that we are exploring is bring your own device, where what we're looking at is, we have computer clusters all around the campus. What would happen if we could give every single student a laptop that could service what they needed from their teaching and learning? So it could pull down, from the cloud, any software they needed, whether that was sort of quite generic word processing things or specific laboratory type software. So everybody had their own device as well. Now, there's lots of things to work through there, but that sort of conceptually, that's what we're looking at. Things we're going to have to work through, things like, well, if students have their own device already, what does that mean? Are we asking them to bring 2 devices on campus, etc.? So, which is obviously not what we'd want to do. But we're exploring that, because I think that would support reducing that digital divide as well. The other thing that we're doing at the minute is we're chatting to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority and this is ourselves with MMU and with Salford, to look at, can you extend EduRoam, so our Wi-Fi, across the city? So you could be anywhere, within a certain location, a certain radius within the city, and you'd be able to access EduRoam. So you wouldn't have to try accessing your work if you're sitting, in a park trying to use a public Wi-Fi or use your own data because you're tethering. You'd be able to access EduRoam in a really, really secure way. We're also chatting to the bus companies as well to see if we could actually get it on buses, so EduRoam on buses as well. And again, these are all things that we're trying to do to address that digital divide.
Okay, so this leads me into my question surrounding the delivery of the strategy. So, over the summer, the Mancunian reported on the chaos during modular enrolment due to IT system failures and a website which students have described as complicated to navigate and outdated. Now, Emily Turvey, the Students' Union's humanities officer, has made this one of her key manifesto points. And alongside this, you've been talking about EduRoam, and while that all sounds great to extend it, it still frequently crashes and is unavailable for long periods of time, leaving students without an internet connection on campus or in halls. So do you think the university's digital infrastructure is going to be able to support the launch of an entirely new digital learning programme?
I think it will be able to support it when we launch these. So, between now and 2025, we'll be able to launch some of this. You're right. I mean, the digital infrastructure of the university could be a lot better. I think everybody would agree with that, including our head of IT. He's working very, very hard to make sure that we don't have outages, network outages, etc., like we do have. Some of the big investments and the big sort of change programs that are ongoing at the minute are to do with stabilising our IT. It's absolutely crucial for everything that we do really as a university, but certainly from our teaching and learning point of view. And if we do want to do more, rely more on the digital perspectives in a flexible learning way, then we have to have that IT infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. How much will all this cost, this IT infrastructure, all these programs, these new spaces? So how much will it cost, and where will the money come from?
It will. I wouldn't look at it as a cost. I would personally look at it as an investment in teaching and learning. And I don't know the overall figure, but let's just say it's an ongoing big investment in teaching and learning.
Okay. So would you say that it's one of the university's kind of big goals for the rest of the decade then, to overhaul digital learning?
To overall our IT infrastructure, I would say it is, and to invest in our flexible learning, of which we need to rely on that digital perspective, yes.
Okay, so moving on to my kind of like final question. So firstly, I know we kind of mentioned it before, but what's the timeline for this strategy's implementation, and when will it be fully administered and a routine part of university life?
Yeah, so as I say, there's ongoing investment. The programme itself will carry on until 2026. Current students won't see a radical change. I think they'll see more gradual improvement. Such things like our digital skills training, the new learning tools and technology, the innovation spaces that we've spoken about, etc. So there'll be quite a lot of things that our current students will also see. In the future, it's important that we build an education at the University of Manchester that does work for everyone, and that might be your traditional 3-year, 4-year degrees, or your 1-year, 2-year postgraduate degree. But it might also be people later on in their careers. It might be off campus, it might be online, it might be in our international centres, etc. We want to make sure that there is greater flexibility in that Manchester education in terms of its pace, its place, and the different pathways to it. And to make sure we bring together the very best of that face-to-face activities, all those sort of on-campus activities that we've done for years and are very good at, but also that extra support in terms of the digital, sort of augmenting it with digital skills as well. And it's all about really just creating that inclusive, accessible and international culture for our learning activities on campus and off campus.
So I know we just kind of touched on it, but to kind of finish off, so in one sentence, why is the university doing this, and what do you hope to achieve through this flexible learning strategy?
The university is doing it because it's important to build a future, a Manchester education future that is inclusive, accessible and international for as many people as possible.
Okay. Dan, George, thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe.
That's it for today's episode of Under the Spotlight. I hope you all learned something new about flexible learning, and if you have any questions, please contact the Flexible Learning team. Dan, what's the best way to contact you?
So we have an email address, flexiblelearning@manchester.ac.uk, but everybody please feel free to contact me directly, danielle.george@manchester.ac.uk.
Thank you. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to check out our previous episodes, including this week's interview with Sasha Lord, and don't forget to subscribe to FuseTV and check out the Mancunian's print issue. Until next time.